my fellow Syrian colleagues here, and to be with all of you. And thank you to CSID for consistently doing this important conference year in, year out. It's a very important topic and subject when it comes to the region. I'll be brief. That's probably my State Department training. So if I go over, 10 minutes, let me know. Obviously, you've all been watching the historical developments in Syria, which to some degree caught many of us by surprise in terms of the pace, in terms of the change of how it happened and how it's continuing to happen. Of course, we all had hoped that this day would come, but did we imagine that it would come on December 8th the way it did, and Syria today would be where it is and where it seems to be heading? I think the answer is no. There were signs of it. The regime has been crumbling from within. Its backers have been weakened over time, whether in Ukraine or in Lebanon or in Iran. Its source of funding, its morale, and obviously its corruption and abuse of its people contributed to that. But what I'm really looking at is where does Syria go and how does that impact the region and the global community, including the United States. I think that you have an administration here that is pushing forward in historic ways and in bold ways, but for different reasons, right? There's no monolithic reason within this administration, just like in any administration, but it is a confluence of interests that are coming together. The geopolitical imperative, obviously the reorientation of Syria is of interest to a lot of folks, including senior members of the Trump administration, particularly, Secretary of State Rubio and others like him. Others look at the opportunity to cement relations with Saudi Arabia, with Turkey, and to forge kind of a new axis in the region that is focused on investment and development and growth and stability through that. And here are the personal relationships, obviously, that have been developed over time between President Trump and the Saudi Crown Prince, the President of Turkey, and others in the region has clearly played a role. Personalized or patrimonial politics is a way to understand what's happening here. It's personal relations, and but also reading what the new U.S. envoy to Syria and ambassador to Turkey has been posting, you would think it's a far left liberal on the West Coast talking about the imperialist past of the region and the need to give it more agency and independence, but that's coming from Tom Barrack, who works for President Trump.
How is that?
And so how is that? I think that what we have to understand is the Trump administration is a unique administration. We often think in Democratic or Republican terms, but they're not quite just that. They are obviously a Republican administration, but they have their own view on the region and the world, and they have their relationships. And I think that they have, and this is something that Trump has always said, which is, look, we don't want to be involved in wars in the region. We want to be making money. We want to be investing, and I want to have friends. I don't want to have enemies. Now, where he will run into trouble, as you're seeing with Ukraine and maybe the Iranian negotiation or even Gaza, is he loves to make a deal, right? And thankfully, the new Syrian leadership is looking to make deals, right? President al-Shara in Syria and his team, they want to make deals because they want to rebuild the country. So the interests are aligning in that sense. They're aligning with the Europeans, who also not only want to make a deal, they want to send back some refugees, hopefully, or at least tell their politics, their political, their community that, look, they can go back now, even if not most of them go back. But where I think the administration will run into issues is when there are intractable issues, when their interests do not align, right? The interests of Russia and Ukraine do not align. The interests of Israel and the Palestinians do not align. And the interest of Syria, in some level, with the U.S., with the Europeans, with the Israelis, is not going to align in some areas, right? So it'll be interesting to see how do they navigate that, where it's less clear where the interests are. But I think just in a simpler way, looking at Syria and the map, where it's located. What's interesting about Syria is, people forget it when it is, a source of tension, of instability, but it's now extremely relevant given the change that has happened there. Given the opportunity, and that's something I want to conclude with. From a U.S. perspective, when you look at Saudi Arabia and Turkey, who's in the middle? It's Syria. If you're looking at the energy gateway to Europe, if you're looking at a new hub for investments, and we can talk more about that, traditionally it's been what? Tel Aviv and Dubai. And I think a lot of people want to be in Syria. It's a lovely country. It's on the Mediterranean. It has gas, oil. It's bordering all these countries. It's 25 million people that can get to 30 million very quickly. There's a lot of tech and investments in tech that are possibly advantageous not just for Syria but for the investors. The country can benefit quite a bit from AI, for example, as it looks to redevelop its industries, to leapfrog a few steps. I think it can become a very big destination for tourists and tourism. And that's going to give some of those countries I mentioned a run for their money over time. And I think so what you're seeing, particularly from the Israelis, is a concern not about Syria as a source of instability. It's actually the opposite. What they're concerned about is a stable and prosperous Syria, which will compete with them in many ways and across many fields. Where does democracy, inclusivity, transparency comes into play here? A lot of questions, I think, going to remain about Syria and where it's heading. Elections have been announced to be in about 4 years or so. People are asking whether that's too long. Is that just right? It certainly needs time, obviously. But others are asking, okay, inclusivity, and let's not, talk about minorities and all that. It's just inclusivity of different political perspectives, different even views on the economy, for example, or about the political orientation of Syria. Are you going to see political parties in Syria? Are you going to see opposition groups tolerated? What's the extent of the freedom of speech? It's not just about the superficial Western view of looking like, are people going to drink or not and wear miniskirts? Like, the personal liberties issue, actually, I think the government is too sophisticated for that. They're beyond that stuff. It's like, you can have your personal liberties, but the real litmus test is going to be the management of the country and its future, and how inclusive is that going to be? Not about necessarily like this particular group or that particular, but anybody with different or diverse views or not part of the inner circles of the new leadership. That's going to be a challenge for the question of democratic governance. But so far, so good. And, these are exciting times and important times. And Syria will be probably one of the more dynamic countries to watch over the next decade.